Hello, and welcome to Sleepless History. I'm your host, and tonight we're going to explore the ancient Mayan civilization in extensive detail. This episode is designed to help you drift off to sleep while learning about one of the most fascinating cultures in human history. So get comfortable, close your eyes if you'd like, and let's begin our journey into the world of the Maya. The story of the Maya is not a simple one. It spans thousands of years, covers vast territories, and involves countless individuals whose names have been lost to time. Tonight, we'll walk through their history slowly and methodically, examining the rise and fall of their great cities, their daily lives, their beliefs, and the legacy they left behind. Let us begin at the very beginning, in a time before the Great Pyramids rose above the jungle canopy, before the kings carved their names in stone, before the Maya became the Maya as we know them today. Part 1. The Earliest Beginnings. The story of the Maya begins somewhere around 7000 BCE, in the archaic period of Mesoamerican history. At this time, the people who would eventually become the Maya were not yet a distinct civilization. They were small groups of hunter-gatherers moving through the forests and along the coasts of what is now southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and parts of Honduras and El Salvador. These early peoples lived simply. They hunted deer and wild pigs. They gathered fruits, nuts, and edible plants from the forest. They fished in rivers and along the coast. Their tools were made of stone, bone, and wood. They had not yet discovered agriculture, at least not in any systematic way, and so they moved with the seasons, following the availability of food. Around 3000 BCE, something began to change. The people in this region started to settle in one place for longer periods. They began to experiment with growing their own food. Maize, which we call corn today, became increasingly important. The wild ancestor of corn, a grass called teosinte, was gradually transformed through selective breeding into something more useful, more productive. Beans and squash were also cultivated. These three crops, corn, beans, and squash, would become the foundation of Mayan agriculture and diet. As agriculture developed, permanent villages began to appear. People built simple houses with pole frames and thatched roofs. They made pottery to store food and water. They developed more sophisticated tools. The population began to grow. With more reliable food sources, communities could support more people, and with more people, communities could accomplish more elaborate projects. This period, from around 2000 BCE to 250 BCE, is known as the Preclassic or Formative period. It was during this time that the foundations of Mayan civilization were laid. The early Maya began to develop the characteristics that would define their culture for the next 2000 years. In the Middle Preclassic period, roughly from 1000 BCE to 400 BCE, we see the emergence of the first true Mayan ceremonial centers. These were not yet the great stone cities that would come later, but they were significant nonetheless. At sites like Nakbe and El Mirador in the Petén region of Guatemala, the Maya began to construct large platform mounds and pyramids. El Mirador in particular deserves our attention. This site, hidden deep in the jungle of northern Guatemala, was one of the first great Maya cities. Construction at El Mirador began around 600 BCE, and by 300 BCE it had become a massive urban centre. The main pyramid complex, known as La Danta, is one of the largest pyramids ever built, with a total volume exceeding that of many Egyptian pyramids. Imagine, if you will, the workers hauling limestone blocks through the jungle. There were no beasts of burden in ancient Mesoamerica, no horses, no oxen, no camels. Everything was carried by human labour, teams of workers, perhaps hundreds or even thousands of them, moving stone and earth, building layer upon layer, year after year, generation after generation. The people of El Mirador developed sophisticated water management systems. They built reservoirs and channels to collect and distribute rainwater. This was essential because the region experiences a pronounced dry season, and without stored water, a large population could not be sustained. They also developed long-distance trade networks. Obsidian from the highlands of Guatemala has been found at El Mirador, indicating trade connections spanning hundreds of kilometers. Jade, cacao, and other valuable goods moved along these trade routes, connecting distant communities and facilitating the exchange of ideas as well as goods. But let us not get ahead of ourselves. Let us consider the daily life of an ordinary person living in this early period. Imagine a farmer, let's call him somewhere around 400 BCE. He wakes before dawn in his small house. The walls are made of wooden poles, the roof thatched with palm leaves. He sleeps on a mat on the earthen floor, as do his wife and children. His first task is to tend to his milpa, his cornfield. He walks out into the pre-dawn darkness, the air cool and moist. The milpa is not far from the village, carved out of the forest through slash and burn agriculture. He has cut down a section of forest, allowed the vegetation to dry, then burned it. The ash enriches the soil. In this clearing, he has planted corn, beans, and squash together. The corn stalks provide support for the bean vines to climb. The squash spreads along the ground, its broad leaves shading the soil and preventing weeds from growing. This agricultural technique, known as the Three Sisters, is efficient and sustainable when practiced on a small scale with sufficient fallow periods. Our farmer examines his corn plants. They are growing well, but he must remain vigilant against pests and weeds. He uses a simple digging stick to loosen the soil around the plants and remove any weeds he finds. This work is monotonous but necessary. Hour after hour, day after day, he tends his field. As the sun rises higher and the heat becomes oppressive, he returns to his village. His wife has prepared a simple meal, corn tortillas, beans, perhaps some chili peppers. They eat together, sitting outside their house. The children play nearby, watched over by an elderly grandmother who sits in the shade, weaving cotton thread into cloth. In the afternoon, our farmer might work on a communal project. Perhaps the village is building a new platform for a temple, or digging a new reservoir, or constructing a house for a newly married couple. The entire community participates in such projects. There is no money to pay workers, no formal economy as we would understand it. Instead, people contribute their labour as part of their obligations to the community and their rulers. As evening approaches, our farmer might participate in a religious ceremony. Religion permeates every aspect of Maya life. The gods are present in the rain that waters the crops, in the sun that makes them grow, in the earth that nurtures them. Offerings must be made, rituals must be performed. Perhaps tonight there is a ceremony to honour Hak, the rain god. The village shaman leads the ritual, burning copal incense, reciting prayers, making offerings of food and drink. After the ceremony, our farmer returns to his house. As darkness falls, he sits with his family, perhaps telling stories or teaching his sons about farming and his daughters about household tasks. Then, exhausted from a long day of labour, he lies down on his mat and sleeps. This was the rhythm of life for most Maya throughout their history. The vast majority of the population were farmers living in small villages, working their fields, participating in community life and religious ceremonies. The great cities, the elaborate temples, the carved monuments, all of this was built on the foundation of agricultural surplus produced by countless farmers like our imaginary friend. Part 2. The Classic Period begins. Around 250 CE, the Maya civilization entered what archaeologists call the Classic Period. This period, lasting from roughly 250 CE to 900 CE, represents the height of Maya achievement. It was during this time that the Maya built their greatest cities, produced their most sophisticated art, and developed their complex hieroglyphic writing system to its fullest extent. The transition from the pre-classic to the classic period was not sudden. It was a gradual process of political centralization, population growth, and cultural elaboration. The great cities of the classic period did not appear overnight. They grew slowly, over generations and centuries. One of the earliest and most important classic period cities was Tikal, located in the Petén region of Guatemala. Tikal had been occupied since the middle pre-classic period, but it was during the early classic, from 250 to 600 CE, that it emerged as a major power. The early kings of Tikal are somewhat obscure to us. Their names are known from inscriptions, but the details of their reigns are sparse. The first clearly documented king of Tikal is Yaks Eheb Shuk, whose name means first step shark. He is recorded as founding the ruling dynasty around 90 CE, though this date may be more legendary than historical. More historically certain is King Siaj Chankawi II, who ruled Tikal in the 4th century CE. Under his leadership, Tikal began to expand its influence over neighbouring cities. The Maya political system was not one of unified empire, but rather a complex network of alliances, tributary relationships, and periodic warfare between competing city-states. In 378 CE, something significant happened at Tikal. A foreign warlord named Siaj Ka'ak, whose name translates to "fire is born," arrived at the city. He may have come from the great city of Teotihuacan in central Mexico, or he may have been sent by a ruler who had ties to that city. On the same day that Siaj Ka'ak arrived at Tikal, the existing king died. Whether this was coincidence, or whether Siaj Ka'ak assassinated the king, we do not know. What followed was a period of foreign influence at Tikal. A new king was installed, a young boy named Yaks Nuan Ahayin, who may have been the son of Siaj Ka'ak or of a ruler connected to Teotihuacan. Art and architecture at Tikal began to show Teotihuacan influences. Warriors were depicted in Teotihuacan-style regalia, carrying Teotihuacan weapons. This connection to Teotihuacan, one of the largest cities in the world at that time, appears to have brought prestige and power to Tikal. The city grew and prospered. New temples were built, new monuments erected. Tikal's influence spread across the Maya lowlands. But Tikal was not alone. Other Maya cities were also growing in size and power. Calakmul, located in what is now the Mexican state of Campeche, emerged as Tikal's great rival. For centuries, these two cities would compete for dominance over the Maya world. The rivalry between Tikal and Calakmul shaped Maya political history during the Classic period. Each city formed alliances with smaller cities, creating two great power blocks. Cities were forced to choose sides, pledging loyalty to one or the other of these great powers. Wars were fought, kings were captured and sacrificed, cities were conquered and subordinated. In 562 CE, Calakmul and its allies achieved a significant victory over Tikal. The king of Tikal, Wakchan Kawil, was defeated in battle. This defeat ushered in a period of decline for Tikal. For over a century, from 562 to 682, Tikal erected no dated monuments. This hiatus in monumental construction suggests political turmoil and reduced power. Meanwhile, Calakmul prospered. Its kings built grand palaces and temples. They formed marriage alliances with other royal families, strengthening their network of supporters. Calakmul's influence extended from the Usumacinta region in the west to the Caribbean coast in the east. But political fortunes in the Maya world could change quickly. In 682, a new king came to power in Tikal. His name was Jasau Chan Kawil, and he would restore Tikal to greatness. Jasau Chan Kawil was a warrior and a builder. Shortly after taking the throne, he began a series of military campaigns against Calakmul and its allies. In 695, he achieved a major victory, capturing and apparently sacrificing an important lord from Calakmul. In 711, he captured the king of Calakmul himself, a ruler named Yehak Kak. These victories restored Tikal's prestige and power. Jasau Chan Kawil used his military successes to legitimize his rule and to fund ambitious building projects. He commissioned the construction of Temple 1, one of Tikal's most iconic structures. This steep pyramid, rising 65 meters above the Great Plaza, served as Jasau Chan Kawil's funerary monument. When he died in 734, he was buried in a tomb within the pyramid, accompanied by rich grave goods, including jade ornaments, pottery vessels, and carved bones. Temple 1 still stands today, a testament to Jasau Chan Kawil's power and to the skill of Maya architects and builders. Imagine the effort required to construct such a monument. The pyramid contains approximately 145,000 cubic meters of stone and fill. All of this material was quarried, shaped, and moved by human labor. The facing stones were carefully fitted together without mortar. The temple on top was decorated with elaborate carved wooden lintels and a massive roof comb that made the structure even taller and more imposing. Why build something so enormous, so labor-intensive? For the Maya, these pyramids were more than just tombs or temples. They were representations of sacred mountains, connections between the earthly realm and the supernatural world. They were statements of power, visible from great distances, asserting the authority and legitimacy of the ruler who commissioned them. But let us step back from the great kings and their monuments for a moment and consider the broader society that supported them. What was life like for the average person during the Classic period? The Maya lived in a hierarchical society. At the top was the king, known as the Kulhul Ajor, which translates roughly as Divine Lord or holy ruler. The king was considered semi-divine, a mediator between the human world and the realm of the gods. He performed rituals to ensure the continued favour of the gods, to bring rain for the crops, to ensure victory in war, to maintain cosmic order. Below the king were the nobles, the aristocratic class. These were the king's relatives, the high priests, the military commanders, the administrators who managed the kingdom's affairs. They lived in stone palaces in the city centres. They wore elaborate jewellery and clothing. They were literate, able to read and write in the Maya hieroglyphic script. Below the nobles were the commoners, who made up the vast majority of the population. These were the farmers, the craftsmen, the labourers. They lived in simple houses on the outskirts of the cities or in rural villages. They paid tribute to the nobles and the king, providing labour for building projects and agricultural products to support the urban population. At the bottom of the social hierarchy were slaves. Slavery existed in Maya society, though the details are not entirely clear to us. Slaves might be prisoners of war, criminals, or people who had been sold into slavery due to debt. They performed the most menial and difficult labour. Let us imagine the daily life of a noble woman in Tikal during the reign of Jasar Chan Karwil. We'll call her Lady Ix Muan, a fictional name but representative of the period. She is the daughter of a high-ranking noble, married to one of the king's cousins. Lady Ix Muan wakes in her palace chamber. The walls are plastered and painted with colourful murals depicting mythological scenes and historical events. She sleeps on a raised platform with woven mats and cotton blankets, far more comfortable than the sleeping arrangements of commoners. Her first task is to bathe. She has servants who bring water heated over a fire. They help her wash, using soap made from the roots of certain plants. After bathing, she dresses carefully. Her clothing is made of fine cotton woven with intricate patterns. She wears a huipil, a long tunic-like garment decorated with embroidery and perhaps small jade beads. She adorns herself with jewellery, a jade necklace, ear ornaments, bracelets, anklets. Her head is bound in the distinctive Maya fashion. From infancy, boards were used to shape her skull into an elongated form, a sign of beauty and high status among the Maya. Her teeth have been filed and inlaid with small pieces of jade, another mark of her elite position. After dressing, Lady Ix Muan takes a light breakfast of corn gruel mixed with honey and perhaps some fruit. Then she attends to her duties. As a noble woman, she has responsibilities in organising household affairs, managing servants, and participating in religious ceremonies. Today, there is to be a ceremony in one of the temples. Lady Ix Muan must be present, along with other noble women. They will offer incense and prayers, make offerings to the gods. The ceremony will last several hours, conducted by priests in elaborate costumes, accompanied by music from drums, flutes, and rattles. After the ceremony, Lady Ix Muan returns to her palace. She spends the afternoon in various activities. Perhaps she works on weaving a piece of cloth on a backstrap loom. Perhaps she meets with other noble women to discuss matters of interest. Perhaps she instructs servants in the preparation of food for an upcoming feast. In the evening, there is a formal dinner. Her husband is present, as are other members of the extended family. They sit on mats in a large hall. Servants bring dish after dish, tamales filled with meat and spices, stewed turkey, chocolate drink whisked to a froth, fruits, honey. They eat with their fingers, using tortillas to scoop up food. After dinner, there might be entertainment. Musicians play, dancers perform, stories are told. The noble class enjoys leisure time that commoners never have. Finally, late in the evening, Lady Ixmuwan retires to her chamber. A servant attends her, helping her remove her jewelry and prepare for sleep. She lies down on her comfortable sleeping platform, and as she drifts off, she might reflect on her fortunate position in life, protected from the hardships that most people endure. This is, of course, an idealized picture. Even nobles faced uncertainties. Political intrigue could lead to disgrace or death. Warfare could result in capture and sacrifice. Disease struck all levels of society, but compared to the lives of commoners, the elite certainly enjoyed considerable advantages. Part 3. The height of Maya achievement. The late Classic period, from roughly 600 to 800, represents the apex of Maya civilization. During this time, Maya cities reached their maximum population and territorial extent. Art and architecture flourished. The hieroglyphic writing system was used extensively, producing a rich body of inscriptions that recorded historical events, astronomical observations, and mythological narratives. Let us consider some of the greatest cities of this period. We have already discussed Tikal and Calakmul, but there were many others, each with its own character and importance. Palenque, located in the modern Mexican state of Chiapas, was one of the most beautiful Maya cities. Its architecture is renowned for its elegance and proportion. The palace at Palenque is a complex of courtyards, galleries, and rooms, notable for its 4-story tower, a unique feature in Maya architecture. But Palenque is perhaps most famous for the Temple of the Inscriptions, the funerary pyramid of King Kinich Janab Pakal, known as Pakal the Great. Pakal ruled Palenque for an astonishing 68 years, from 615 to 683 CE. Pakal came to power at a difficult time. Palenque had been defeated in war by the rival city of Calakmul in 611. The previous king had been killed, and the city was in disarray. Pakal was only 12 years old when he became king, but over his long reign he rebuilt Palenque and made it one of the most powerful and prosperous cities in the Maya world. When Pakal died at the age of 80, he was buried in an elaborate tomb deep within the Temple of the Inscriptions. His body was placed in a massive stone sarcophagus, the lid of which is carved with one of the most famous images in Maya art. The carving shows Pakal at the moment of death, falling into the jaws of the underworld, while above him rises the world tree, connecting the underworld, the earth, and the heavens. The tomb was filled with rich grave goods, jade masks, jewelry, pottery, carved bones. The tomb chamber itself is decorated with stucco reliefs, showing the figures of Pakal's ancestors emerging from the earth, reinforcing his connection to the past and legitimizing his royal lineage. The discovery of Pakal's tomb in 1952 by archaeologist Alberto Ruz-Luillier was one of the most significant finds in Maya archaeology. For the first time, it was definitively proven that Maya pyramids served as funerary monuments, not just temples. Another great city of the late Classic period was Copan, located in western Honduras. Copan was renowned for its sculptural art. The city produced some of the finest 3-dimensional stone carvings in the Maya world. Stelae at Copan are carved in such deep relief that the figures appear almost to be freestanding sculptures. The most famous king of Copan was Uaxtlajuan Ubar Kawil, also known as 18 Rabbit or 18 Images. He ruled from 695 to 738 and was responsible for many of Copan's most impressive monuments, including several beautifully carved stelae in the Great Plaza. However, 18 Rabbit's reign ended badly. In 738, he was captured in battle by Kaktiluchan Yopat, king of the rival city of Quiriguá. 18 Rabbit was beheaded, a humiliating end for a once powerful king. This event illustrates the constant political instability of the Maya world. Even the greatest kings could fall victim to the fortunes of war. Quiriguá, which had been subordinate to Copan, took advantage of this victory to assert its independence. The new king of Copan, Kak Yipyaj Chan Kawil, eventually restored the city's power, but the relationship with Quiriguá remained tense. Let us also consider the city of Yaxchilan, located on the banks of the Usumacinta River in what is now the border region between Mexico and Guatemala. Yaxchilan is famous for its stone lintels, carved with scenes of royal rituals and historical events. One of the most remarkable series of lintels comes from structure 23 at Yaxchilan. These lintels depict scenes from the life of King Shield Jaguar and his principal wife, Lady Zoc. In one famous scene, Lady Zoc is shown performing a bloodletting ritual, pulling a thorn-studded rope through her tongue. Blood drips onto paper in a basket below. This ritual bloodletting was a way for Maya royalty to communicate with the gods and ancestors. In another lintel, Lady Jock is shown having a vision. From the blood-soaked paper rises a serpent, and from the serpent's mouth emerges the figure of an ancestor armed for war. These images give us a glimpse into Maya religious beliefs and practices. Blood was considered a sacred substance, a gift to the gods. By shedding their own blood, Maya rulers opened a portal to the supernatural world. These bloodletting rituals could be extremely painful and even dangerous. Rulers would pierce their tongues, ears, or genitals with obsidian blades, stingray spines, or thorn-studded ropes. The loss of blood, combined with ritual fasting and possibly the ingestion of psychoactive substances, could induce altered states of consciousness, which were interpreted as visions of gods and ancestors. From the perspective of a modern observer, these practices might seem extreme or even barbaric, but for the Maya, they were essential. The king was responsible for maintaining the order of the cosmos, for ensuring that the sun rose each day, that the rains came in season, that crops grew. These bloodletting rituals were one way the king fulfilled this cosmic responsibility. Let us now turn our attention to Maya intellectual achievements during the Classic period. The Maya developed one of the most sophisticated writing systems in the pre-Columbian Americas. Maya hieroglyphic writing is a logosyllabic system, meaning it uses both logographic signs that represent whole words and syllabic signs that represent sounds. The Maya script was used to record a wide variety of information. Historical texts on monuments recorded the deeds of kings, births, accessions to the throne, marriages, military victories, building dedications, deaths. Astronomical texts track the movements of celestial bodies. Religious texts described mythology and ritual. There were also more mundane texts dealing with tribute, trade, and administration, though these are less well preserved. Learning to read and write in the Maya script required years of training. It was the preserve of the elite, of nobles and priests who had the leisure time and resources to acquire such specialized knowledge. Scribes were highly valued members of Maya society. They were often depicted in art, shown with their writing tools, brushes, ink pots, painted books. Speaking of books, the Maya produced many books known as codices. These were made of bark paper, coated with lime plaster and folded accordion style. The pages were painted with intricate scenes and hieroglyphic texts. Tragically, most Maya books were destroyed during the Spanish conquest in the 16th century. Overzealous Spanish priests, viewing the books as works of the devil, burned them in great bonfires. Only 4 Maya codices are known to have survived to the present day: the Dresden Codex, the Madrid Codex, the Paris Codex, and the Grolier Codex. These surviving codices deal primarily with astronomy, divination, and ritual. The Dresden Codex, for example, contains extensive astronomical tables, including calculations of the cycles of Venus. The Maya were expert astronomers, carefully observing the movements of the sun, moon, planets, and stars. They developed a complex calendar system to track time. The Maya used several interlocking calendars. The Tzolk'in was a 260-day sacred calendar used for divination and scheduling religious ceremonies. The Harb was a 365-day solar calendar divided into 18 months of 20 days each, plus a short period of 5 unlucky days at the end of the year. These two calendars meshed together to create the calendar round, a 52-year cycle. Additionally, the Maya used the long count, a linear count of days from a mythological starting point, which corresponds to August 11th, 3114 BCE in our calendar. The long count allowed the Maya to record dates far into the past and future. Inscriptions sometimes refer to dates millions of years in the past or future, demonstrating the Maya conception of deep time. The famous Maya date of December 21st, 2012, which some people believed would mark the end of the world, was actually just the end of a 13 Baktun cycle in the long count, a period of approximately 5,125 years. The Maya did not predict the end of the world on this date. It was simply the completion of a major cycle and the beginning of a new one. The Maya interest in astronomy was not purely academic. Astronomical events were believed to have religious and political significance. The appearance of Venus as the morning star, for example, was associated with warfare. Kings would time military campaigns to coincide with Venus's appearance. Eclipses were particularly important and potentially ominous events. The Maya could predict eclipses with considerable accuracy. Knowledge of when an eclipse would occur gave rulers a powerful tool. They could prepare the population for the event, conduct appropriate rituals, and demonstrate their special connection to the cosmos. Let us consider Maya mathematics as well. The Maya developed a vigesimal or base 20 number system. They used only 3 symbols, a dot representing 1, a bar representing 5, and a shell representing 0. The Maya were one of the first civilizations to develop the concept of zero, a significant mathematical achievement. Using this simple system, the Maya could write any number and perform complex calculations. They used mathematics in their astronomical observations, in architectural planning, and in tribute and trade accounting. The precision of Maya calculations is impressive. For example, they calculated the length of the solar year as 365.2420 days, remarkably close to the modern value of 365.2422 days. They calculated the lunar month as 29.53059 days, very close to the modern value of 29.53059 days. Part 4. The Decline and Collapse. As we move into the 9th century CE, we encounter one of the great mysteries of Maya civilization, the collapse of the classic Maya in the southern lowlands. Between approximately 800 and 900 CE, the great cities of the Peten region and surrounding areas were abandoned. Monumental construction ceased. The carving of dated stelae stopped. Populations declined dramatically. What caused this collapse? This question has fascinated archaeologists and historians for over a century, and there is still no single agreed-upon answer. The collapse was likely the result of multiple interacting factors. One factor was certainly environmental stress. By the late Classic period, the Maya lowlands supported a dense population. Some estimates suggest that at the height of the Classic period, the population density in some areas approached 200 people per square kilometre, comparable to modern rural densities in the region. This dense population required intensive agriculture to support. The Maya practiced various forms of agricultural intensification, terracing hillsides, building raised fields in wetlands, digging canals, using household gardens. These techniques allowed for greater food production, but they also made the system more vulnerable to disruption. Several severe droughts occurred in the 9th century. Paleoclimate data from lake sediments and other sources indicate periods of significantly reduced rainfall. These droughts would have stressed the agricultural system. Crop failures would have led to food shortages. Starvation and malnutrition would have weakened the population, making them more susceptible to disease. Social and political factors also played a role. The Maya political system was based on the power and prestige of individual kings. Kings justified their rule by their ability to maintain cosmic order, ensure agricultural fertility, and provide protection from enemies. When droughts led to crop failures, when military campaigns ended in defeat, the legitimacy of kings was called into question. Warfare intensified during the terminal Classic period. Cities fought each other with increasing frequency and ferocity. The capture and sacrifice of rival kings became more common. Trade networks were disrupted. Instead of the relatively stable political order of the early and middle Classic periods, with the great powers of Tikal and Calakmul dominating regional politics, the late Classic saw a fragmentation of power, with many smaller kingdoms competing for resources and influence. This political instability would have made it difficult to organize the large-scale communal labor projects that Maya civilization depended on, maintaining reservoirs and canals, constructing and repairing buildings, clearing agricultural land. As central authority weakened, the ability to coordinate such efforts declined. There is also evidence of internal social stress. At some sites, archaeologists have found evidence of destruction and burning of elite residences, suggesting popular revolts against the ruling class. If commoners blamed the elite for failing to maintain cosmic order and provide for the welfare of the people, they might have risen up against them. Environmental degradation may have contributed to the collapse as well. Centuries of intensive agriculture may have led to soil exhaustion and erosion. Deforestation for agriculture and for obtaining wood for construction and fuel may have altered local climate patterns, reducing rainfall. The Maya may have, in effect, overexploited their environment, making it less able to support a large population. The collapse was not sudden or uniform. Different cities were abandoned at different times. Some areas continued to be occupied even as others were depopulated, and the collapse was not the end of Maya civilization. The Maya did not disappear. They continued to live in the northern lowlands of the Yucatan Peninsula and in the highlands of Guatemala and Chiapas. But the classic Maya civilization of the southern lowlands did come to an end. The great cities were abandoned, slowly reclaimed by the jungle. Temples and palaces were overgrown with vegetation. Trees grew from the tops of pyramids. Without people to maintain them, the buildings began to crumble. Imagine walking through one of these abandoned cities in, say, the year 1000 CE. The plazas that once teemed with people are empty and silent. Grass grows between the paving stones. Roots crack the stucco facades of buildings. A stela lies toppled, its carved surface weathered and eroded. Somewhere, a jaguar prowls through the ruins, perhaps denning in what was once a royal palace. The forest has returned, patient and relentless, reclaiming what had been briefly taken from it. For the people who remained in the region, life went on, but in a different way. Without the demands of the kings and the urban centres, people returned to simpler village life. They still grew corn and beans, still made pottery, still worshipped the old gods, but the grand scale of classic Maya civilization was gone. Part 5. The Postclassic Period. While the southern lowlands were being abandoned, Maya civilization continued and even flourished in other areas. The Postclassic period, from roughly 900 to 1500 CE, saw the rise of new powers in the northern Yucatan and the highlands. One of the most important post-classic cities was Chichen Itza, located in the northern Yucatan. Chichen Itza had been occupied since the Classic period, but it rose to prominence in the terminal Classic and early Post-Classic from roughly 800 to 1200 CE. Chichen Itza shows significant influence from central Mexico. The city's architecture includes features more commonly associated with cultures from the central highlands, such as the feathered serpent deity Kukulkan, known as Quetzalcoatl in central Mexico. Some scholars have suggested that Chichen Itza was conquered or heavily influenced by a group from central Mexico, possibly the Toltecs, though this interpretation is debated. The most famous structure at Chichen Itza is the pyramid known as El Castillo, or the Temple of Kukulkan. This is a step pyramid with staircases on all four sides, rising to a temple on top. The pyramid has astronomical significance. During the spring and autumn equinoxes, the afternoon sun creates a shadow pattern on the northern staircase that resembles a serpent descending the pyramid. Chichen Itza also features the largest ball court in Mesoamerica. The ball game was an important ritual activity throughout Mesoamerican cultures, including the Maya. The game was played with a heavy rubber ball, which players had to keep in motion using their hips, knees, and elbows, without using their hands or feet. The exact rules are not known to us, but the game had ritual significance and was associated with mythology. The outcomes of ball games could determine matters of political importance, and losing players were sometimes sacrificed. Another important post-classic city was Mayapan, which dominated the northern Yucatan from roughly 1200 to 1450 CE. Mayapan was a large, densely populated city surrounded by a defensive wall. The architecture at Mayapan is less refined than that of earlier cities like Chichen Itza or classic period sites, but the city was nonetheless politically and economically powerful. In the Guatemalan highlands, the Quiche Maya established a powerful kingdom in the post-classic period. Their capital, Cumarcaj, also known as Utatlan, was a fortified city located on a plateau surrounded by deep ravines. The Quiche kingdom expanded its territory through military conquest, dominating much of the western highlands by the 15th century. The Quiche Maya left us an important literary work, the Popol Vuh, or Book of the Council. This text, written in the Quiche language using the Latin alphabet after the Spanish conquest, preserves Quiche mythology and history. The Popol Vuh describes the creation of the world, the adventures of the hero twins, and the origins of the Quiche people. It is one of the most important sources for understanding Maya mythology and worldview. The post-classic period also saw changes in trade and economy. Long-distance trade became increasingly important. Coastal trading canoes transported goods along the Caribbean coast and around the Yucatan Peninsula. Cacao, salt, obsidian, cotton textiles, jade, and other goods moved along these trade routes. When Christopher Columbus encountered a Maya trading canoe off the coast of Honduras during his fourth voyage in 1502, he was impressed by the size of the vessel and the quantity and variety of goods it carried. This encounter was one of the first contacts between Europeans and the Maya, though it would be several more years before sustained contact and conquest began. Part 6. The Spanish Conquest. In 1519, the Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés landed on the coast of Mexico and began the conquest of the Aztec Empire. Within 2 years, the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan had fallen, and Spanish control over central Mexico was established. The conquest of the Maya lands proceeded more slowly. The Maya were not unified under a single empire, as the Aztecs had been. Instead, there were many independent kingdoms and city-states which had to be conquered one by one. The first major Spanish incursion into Maya territory was led by Francisco de Montejo, who was granted the right to conquer the Yucatan in 1526. Montejo and his son, Francisco de Montejo the Younger, spent years trying to subdue the Maya of the Yucatan, facing fierce resistance. The Maya were skilled warriors, and they used their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. They employed guerrilla tactics, ambushing Spanish forces and then melting back into the jungle. Spanish horses and firearms gave the conquistadors a military advantage, but the Maya were numerous and determined. It was not until 1546 that the Spanish were able to establish firm control over the northern and western Yucatan with the founding of the city of Mérida. Even then, Maya resistance continued in the eastern and southern parts of the peninsula. In the highlands of Guatemala, the Spanish conquistador Pedro de Alvarado led the conquest, beginning in 1524. Alvarado was a ruthless and brutal commander. He played different Maya groups against each other, exploiting existing rivalries. The Quiche Maya initially attempted to resist the Spanish. In a famous incident, the Quiche hero Tikal Uman faced Alvarado in single combat and was killed. Following this defeat, the Quiche capital of Kumar Kaj was captured and destroyed. The Quiche king, Oxib Kaj, was burned alive. Other highland Maya groups, such as the Kaqchikel, initially allied with the Spanish against their rivals, but later rebelled when they realized the nature of Spanish rule. The Kaqchikel rebellion lasted several years before it was suppressed. The conquest brought catastrophic consequences for the Maya. European diseases, to which the Maya had no immunity, swept through the population. Smallpox, measles, typhus, and other diseases killed vast numbers of people. Some estimates suggest that the Maya population declined by 90% or more in the century following contact with Europeans. The survivors faced forced labour, tribute demands, and efforts to suppress their religion and culture. Spanish missionaries, primarily Franciscan friars, worked to convert the Maya to Christianity. They built churches, often on the sites of Maya temples, and conducted mass baptisms. Many aspects of Maya culture were suppressed. The Spanish viewed Maya religion as devil worship and sought to eradicate it. As mentioned earlier, Maya books were burned, traditional ceremonies were banned, idols and religious objects were destroyed. However, Maya culture proved resilient. Many Maya continued to practice their traditional religion in secret or blended it with Catholicism, creating syncretic religious practices that combined elements of both traditions. This syncretism continues to the present day in many Maya communities. The Spanish colonial period also saw the creation of important historical documents. Spanish priests and Maya nobles worked together to record Maya history and culture. Works like the books of Chilam Balam, written in the Yucatec Maya language using the Latin alphabet, preserve Maya historical accounts, prophecies, and medical knowledge. One Spanish priest, Fray Diego de Landa, deserves particular mention. Landa was instrumental in the destruction of Maya culture. He organized the burning of Maya books and the torture of Maya who continued to practice traditional religion. In 1562, he held an inquisition in the town of Mani, where 27 Maya lords were tortured and several died. However, Landa later wrote a book, Relación de las Cosas de Yucatán, or Account of the Things of Yucatan, which described Maya culture, religion, and history in considerable detail. Despite his role in the destruction of Maya culture, Landa's book became an invaluable source for later scholars trying to understand the Maya. Ironically, the key to deciphering Maya hieroglyphic writing, which was achieved in the late 20th century, came partly from the description of the Maya writing system that Landa included in his book. Part 7. Daily Life and Culture. Let us now step back from the grand sweep of history and consider in more detail various aspects of Maya daily life and culture. We have touched on Maya agriculture already, but let us delve deeper. The staple crop was corn or maize. Corn was more than just food for the Maya, it was sacred. In Maya mythology, the gods created humans from corn dough. Corn appears constantly in Maya art and iconography. The Maya grew several varieties of corn, adapted to different environmental conditions. They also developed sophisticated processing techniques. Corn kernels were soaked in water mixed with lime, a process called nixtamalization. This process softens the kernels, making them easier to grind, and it also increases the nutritional value of the corn by making niacin more available and improving the balance of amino acids. The softened corn was ground on a metate, a flat stone, using a mano, a cylindrical grinding stone. This was hard, repetitive labour typically performed by women, hour after hour, day after day. Women would kneel at their metards, grinding corn into masa. The corn dough used to make tortillas and tamales. Tortillas were cooked on a comal, a flat griddle placed over a fire. A skilled cook could make dozens of tortillas, slapping the masa between her hands to form thin, round discs, then laying them on the hot comal to cook. Tamales were made by wrapping masa, sometimes with a filling of meat, beans, or chili, in corn husks or banana leaves, then steaming them. Tamales were important ritual foods, often prepared for ceremonies and festivals. Beans provided protein and complemented corn nutritionally. The Maya grew several varieties of beans, including black beans, which remain a staple in Maya cuisine today. Beans were typically boiled and served as a side dish or mashed and used as a filling for tamales. Squash provided vitamins and minerals. The flesh was cooked and eaten, and the seeds were roasted and eaten as snacks or ground to make sauces. Squash blossoms were also consumed as a delicacy. In addition to the three sisters of corn, beans, and squash, the Maya cultivated many other crops. Chili peppers added spice to meals. Tomatoes, avocados, and various fruits such as papaya, guava, and cacao were grown. Cacao, the source of chocolate, was highly valued. Cacao beans were used as currency and were consumed as a frothy chocolate drink, often flavoured with chili or vanilla. The Maya also hunted and fished to supplement their diet. They hunted deer, peccary, monkey, birds, and other game using blowguns, bows and arrows, and traps. In coastal and riverine areas, fish and shellfish were important food sources. The Maya raised dogs and turkeys for meat. Let us turn now to Maya houses and domestic life. The typical Maya house was a simple structure. The walls were made of wooden poles, sometimes plastered with mud. The roof was thatched with palm leaves or grass. The floor was packed earth. Most houses consisted of a single room, though wealthier families might have multiple structures arranged around a courtyard. There was little furniture. People sat and slept on mats on the floor. Possessions were hung from the walls or stored in pottery vessels or baskets. Cooking was done over an open fire, either inside the house or in a separate kitchen structure. Pottery vessels were used for cooking and storage. The Maya made a wide variety of pottery forms: large jars for storing water or grain, bowls for serving food, plates, cups, incense burners. Elite pottery could be very elaborate, decorated with painted scenes and hieroglyphic texts. Some pottery was imported from distant regions as luxury goods. Weaving was an important domestic activity. Women spun cotton thread using a spindle and wove cloth on a backstrap loom. The backstrap loom is a simple device consisting of two bars, one attached to a fixed object, like a tree or post, the other held by a strap that goes around the weaver's back. By leaning back, the weaver maintains tension on the threads. Weaving was time-consuming. but allowed for the creation of complex patterns and designs. Textiles were used for clothing, as tribute items, and as trade goods. Clothing varied by social class. Commoners wore simple garments, a loincloth for men, a huipil or simple dress for women. Elite clothing was more elaborate, with finely woven cloth, embroidery, and decorations of feathers, jade, and other precious materials. Let us consider Maya childhood. Children were cherished and valued, but childhood was not a time of leisure. From an early age, children were expected to contribute to household labour. Boys would help their fathers in the fields or learn a craft. Girls would help their mothers with domestic tasks, grinding corn, weaving, cooking, caring for younger siblings. Education was informal for commoners, consisting of learning by doing. Elite children might receive more formal education, learning to read and write, studying astronomy, history, and ritual. Around puberty, children underwent initiation rites marking their transition to adulthood. The details of these rites varied by region and period, but they typically involved ritual purification, instruction in adult responsibilities, and sometimes painful ordeals such as bloodletting or scarification. Marriage was arranged by families, often to strengthen social or political alliances. Marriage ceremonies involved the exchange of gifts and ritual feasting. Polygamy was practiced by the elite, with kings and nobles having multiple wives, though most commoners had only one spouse. Death was surrounded by ritual. The Maya believed in an afterlife. Commoners were typically buried beneath the floors of their houses or in simple graves. Offerings of pottery, tools, and food were placed with the body to accompany the deceased into the afterlife. Elite burials were much more elaborate. As we have seen with examples like Pakal's tomb at Palenque, kings and nobles were buried in elaborate tombs within pyramids or temples, accompanied by rich offerings of jade, pottery, carved bone, and other valuable items. The Maya believed that the souls of the deceased travelled to the underworld, called Xibalba. The journey was dangerous, requiring the soul to overcome various obstacles and challenges. The Popol Vuh describes the underworld as a place of trials, inhabited by death gods and demons. Part 8. Maya Mythology and Religion. To understand the Maya, we must understand their religious beliefs, for religion permeated every aspect of Maya life. The Maya cosmos was divided into 3 realms: the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. The heavens were layered with 13 levels, each inhabited by different deities. The earth was a flat surface, floating on a primordial sea. The underworld, Xibalba, had 9 levels, each more dangerous and terrifying than the last. At the centre of the cosmos stood the World Tree, a great ceiba tree that connected all 3 realms. Its roots reached into the underworld, its trunk stood on the earth, and its branches extended into the heavens. The World Tree was often represented in Maya art as a cross or a stylized tree with a bird perched on top. The Maya worshipped a pantheon of gods. These deities controlled various aspects of the natural world and human life. Many gods had dual or multiple aspects, appearing in different forms or with different characteristics depending on context. Some of the most important gods included Itzamna, a creator god associated with the heavens, often depicted as an elderly man. Kinich Ajor, the sun god, who travelled across the sky during the day and through the underworld at night. Kayak, the rain god, one of the most important deities for an agricultural people. Chake was often depicted with a long nose and fangs, associated with lightning and thunder. Ixchel, a goddess associated with the moon, fertility, weaving, and medicine. She was often depicted as an elderly woman. The maize god, representing the corn plant, central to Maya life and mythology. The maize god was often depicted as a young, handsome man with an elongated head resembling an ear of corn. The hero twins, Hunahpu and Xbalanque, central figures in Maya mythology. Their adventures, described in the Popol Vuh, include defeating the arrogant bird demon Seven Macaw and journeying to the underworld to defeat the death gods. Cowheel, a god associated with lightning, serpents, and royal power. Kings often held ceremonial bars depicting Cowheel during important rituals. There were also many other gods and supernatural beings, gods of war, gods of merchants, gods of specific days in the calendar, and so on. Maya religious practice involved numerous rituals and ceremonies. These ranged from simple household rituals to elaborate public ceremonies involving the entire community. Offerings were central to Maya religion. The gods required sustenance, and humans provided this through offerings of food, drink, incense, and blood. Copal incense, made from the resin of certain trees, was burned in incense burners to carry prayers to the gods. Bloodletting, as we have discussed, was a particularly important ritual. The blood of kings was considered especially potent. Rulers would perform bloodletting on important occasions: the accession to the throne, the dedication of a new building before going to war, during astronomical events like eclipses. Human sacrifice was also practiced by the Maya, though perhaps not to the extent of some other Mesoamerican cultures like the Aztecs. Sacrificial victims were often captives taken in war, particularly high-status captives like enemy kings or nobles. Sacrifice could take various forms: decapitation, heart extraction, arrow sacrifice, or being thrown into a sacred cenote or natural sinkhole. The sacred cenote at Chichen Itza was one such sacrificial site. Offerings and sacrificial victims were thrown into the deep, water-filled sinkhole. When the cenote was dredged in the early 20th century, archaeologists recovered numerous artifacts: jade ornaments, gold discs, pottery, and human bones. The ball game, mentioned earlier, also had religious significance. The game reenacted mythological events, particularly the hero twins' defeat of the lords of the underworld. Some ball game rituals ended with the sacrifice of players, though whether these were the winners or losers is debated. Caves were considered sacred places, entrances to the underworld. Many caves in Maya territory show evidence of ritual use, offerings left in the depths, altars, carved inscriptions. The Maya believed that entering a cave was to enter the realm of the gods and ancestors. Part 9. Maya Art and Architecture. Maya architecture is characterized by its use of limestone. The Maya quarried limestone blocks, which were then shaped and fitted together. Many buildings were covered with stucco plaster, which was then painted with bright colours: red, blue, green, yellow. Temples were typically built atop pyramids. These temple pyramids served multiple functions. They were monuments to the glory of kings, tombs for deceased rulers, and platforms that elevated temples closer to the realm of the gods. The pyramids had steep staircases leading to the temple on top. Climbing these staircases was itself a ritual act, a symbolic ascent from the earthly realm toward the heavens. At the top, the temple provided a space for rituals to be conducted, visible to the people gathered in the plaza below. Temple interiors were often dark and cramped. The Maya did not use the true arch. Instead, they used corbel vaulting, where each successive course of stones projects slightly inward until the gap is narrow enough to be bridged by a capstone. This technique limited the size of interior spaces. Despite this limitation, Maya architects created impressive buildings. Palaces were large, multi-room structures arranged around courtyards. They served as residences for the royal family and as administrative centres. Ball courts were another important architectural feature. These were eye-shaped or H-shaped playing fields with sloping walls on either side. Spectators could watch from the tops of the walls. Some ball courts had stone rings mounted on the walls, and apparently one way to win the game was to get the ball through one of these rings, though this must have been extremely difficult. Observatory buildings at some sites show the Maya interest in astronomy. At Chichen Itza, the Caracol, a circular building with small windows, may have been used for astronomical observations. Maya sculpture ranged from monumental to miniature. Stelae, large upright stone slabs, were carved with images of rulers and hieroglyphic texts. These were erected in plazas to commemorate important events. Altars, often placed in front of stelae, were carved with additional images and texts. Some altars show bound captives, emphasizing the military prowess of the king. Lintels, the wooden or stone beams over doorways, were carved with ritual scenes. Wooden lintels have rarely survived, but stone lintels from sites like Yaxchilan and Piedras Negras show the high quality of Maya relief carving. Smaller scale sculpture includes jade carvings, carved bone, carved shell, and figurines. The Maya were master jade carvers. Jade was considered more valuable than gold. It was associated with water, vegetation, and life itself. Jade ornaments were worn by the elite and placed in tombs. Maya pottery painting represents some of the finest art of the ancient Americas. On the surfaces of cylindrical vessels, plates, and bowls, Maya artists painted complex scenes, mythological narratives, courtly ceremonies, supernatural beings, historical events. These painted vessels often include hieroglyphic texts that identify the individuals depicted, describe the scene, or give the name of the vessel's owner. The texts sometimes include the signature of the artist, allowing us to identify individual painters. One of the most famous painted vessels is the altar vase, which shows several musicians playing instruments. The detail is exquisite. We can see the expressions on the musicians' faces, the patterns on their clothing, the instruments they hold. Another important medium was painted murals. The Maya decorated the walls of buildings with elaborate murals. The most famous Maya murals are at Bonampak, a site in Chiapas, Mexico. The Bonampak murals, painted around 790 CE, cover the walls of 3 rooms in a building known as Structure 1. They depict a series of events: a royal heir presentation ceremony, a battle, and the torture and sacrifice of captives. The murals are painted in vivid colours and show dozens of figures engaged in various activities. The battle scene is particularly dramatic. Warriors in elaborate costumes clash in combat. Captives are shown being seized. The chaos and violence of battle are vividly portrayed. The scene of captive torture and sacrifice is difficult to view. Bound captives sit on steps, some bleeding from mutilated fingers. Nobles stand watching. A severed head lies on a bed of leaves. These murals give us an unvarnished view of the realities of Maya warfare and its ritual aftermath. Part 10. The Maya Today. The collapse of classic Maya civilization and the Spanish conquest did not mean the end of the Maya people. Today, millions of people in Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador identify as Maya and speak Maya languages. There are over 30 distinct Maya languages belonging to the Mayan language family. Some, like Yucatec Maya and Quiche, are spoken by hundreds of thousands of people. Others are spoken by only a few thousand, or even a few hundred. Many Maya communities maintain traditional practices. They grow corn using traditional agricultural techniques. They weave textiles on backstrap looms. They perform ceremonies that blend ancient Maya beliefs with Catholicism. However, Maya communities have also faced tremendous challenges. In the late 20th century, Guatemala suffered a brutal civil war. The Guatemalan military, dominated by non-indigenous elites, carried out a campaign of genocide against Maya communities, particularly in the highlands. Hundreds of villages were destroyed, tens of thousands of people were killed, and hundreds of thousands were displaced. The Civil War ended in 1996 with a peace agreement, but its legacy continues. Many Maya communities remain impoverished and marginalized. They face discrimination and lack access to education, healthcare, and economic opportunities. Despite these challenges, Maya culture remains vibrant. Maya writers produce literature in Maya languages. Maya artists create works that draw on traditional themes and techniques while engaging with contemporary issues. Maya activists work to preserve their languages and cultures and to advocate for the rights of indigenous peoples. The study of ancient Maya civilization continues as well. Archaeologists working in the Maya region make new discoveries every year. Excavations reveal new information about Maya history and culture. Advances in technology allow researchers to see beneath the jungle canopy using LiDAR, light detection, and ranging, revealing previously unknown sites and structures. The decipherment of Maya hieroglyphic writing achieved primarily in the late 20th century through the work of scholars like Yuri Norozov, Tatiana Proskoryakov, and David Stewart, has revolutionized our understanding of Maya history. We can now read the texts that the Maya themselves wrote, giving us access to their own accounts of their history, beliefs, and achievements. Museums around the world house collections of Maya art and artifacts. The National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City, the British Museum in London, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and many others have significant Maya collections. In the Maya region itself, site museums at places like Palenque, Tikal, and Copan display artifacts found at those sites. Tourism to Maya sites has become economically important for the region. Hundreds of thousands of people visit Chichen Itza, Tulum, Tikal, and other sites each year, drawn by the impressive architecture and the mystique of the ancient Maya. However, tourism and development also pose challenges. Sites can be damaged by too many visitors. looting of archaeological sites remains a problem, as thieves steal artifacts to sell on the illegal antiquities market. Development projects can destroy sites before they can be properly studied. Balancing preservation with development and tourism is an ongoing challenge. The Maya archaeological heritage belongs not just to scholars, but to the Maya people themselves and to all of humanity. Preserving this heritage while allowing people to appreciate it and while supporting the economic development of the region requires careful management and respect for the sites and the cultures that created them. As we come to the end of our journey through Maya history, let us reflect on what we have learned. The Maya civilization was one of the great achievements of ancient humanity. Over thousands of years, the Maya developed sophisticated agriculture, built great cities, created beautiful art, developed writing and mathematics and astronomy. But the Maya were also human, with all the complexity that entails. They built great monuments, but they also fought wars and practiced human sacrifice. They created works of surpassing beauty, but much of that creation was funded by the labour of common people who lived hard lives. They achieved great intellectual accomplishments, but knowledge was largely the preserve of an elite class. Part 11. Maya Warfare and Military Organization. War was a constant reality in the Maya world. Cities competed for resources, territory, and prestige. The ability to wage successful war was essential to a king's legitimacy and power. Maya armies consisted primarily of infantry. Warriors fought with a variety of weapons. The atlatl, or spear thrower, was a wooden device that acted as a lever, allowing a warrior to throw a spear with greater force and accuracy. Obsidian-bladed spears could penetrate even thick cotton armor. Bows and arrows were also used, though they became more common in the Postclassic period. The Maya bow was relatively simple, made of wood, with arrows tipped with obsidian or flint points. For close combat, warriors used clubs and axes. These weapons had blades of obsidian or flint, sharp enough to inflict terrible wounds. A skilled warrior could decapitate an opponent with a single blow. Warriors carried shields for protection, typically round shields made of wood and covered with animal hide or woven material. Some shields were decorated with painted designs or feathers. Body armor consisted of thick cotton, quilted with salt water and allowed to dry, creating a stiff, padded protection. This cotton armor was effective against the weapons of the time. Elite warriors wore more elaborate armor, sometimes incorporating pieces of jade or shell, and elaborate feathered headdresses that made them appear larger and more intimidating. Warfare followed certain patterns. Battles were often scheduled in advance, with both sides agreeing on a time and place to meet. This seems strange to modern sensibilities, but for the Maya, warfare was as much about ritual and display as about practical military objectives. A typical battle began with both armies arrayed in formation, facing each other across an open space. Warriors in elaborate costumes, representing gods or supernatural beings, performed ritual dances. Drums beat, conch shells blared, warriors shouted and sang war songs. Then the battle began. Warriors rushed forward, throwing spears and shooting arrows. As the armies closed, hand-to-hand combat ensued. Warriors fought in pairs or small groups, seeking to capture rather than kill enemies. A captured warrior particularly a high-status one, was worth more alive than dead. Battles were chaotic and brutal, but they were also relatively brief. After a few hours of fighting, one side would usually break and flee. The victors pursued, trying to capture as many fleeing warriors as possible. The aftermath of battle was significant. Captured warriors were bound and brought back to the victor's city. They would be held prisoner, sometimes for months or even years, until an appropriate occasion for their sacrifice arrived. Before their sacrifice, captives might be tortured or humiliated. They might have their fingernails pulled out, be forced to perform degrading acts, or be displayed bound and stripped of their finery while victors mocked them. The actual sacrifice was a public spectacle. The entire population of the city would gather to watch. The captive would be dressed in special garments, painted with symbols. He might be forced to participate in a ritual ball game that he was not allowed to win. Then came the moment of sacrifice. Methods varied. Sometimes the captive was decapitated, his head displayed on a skull rack. Sometimes his heart was cut out. Sometimes he was shot with arrows. Whatever the method, the sacrifice was understood as an offering to the gods, a way of maintaining cosmic order and ensuring the continued prosperity of the city. The king who had captured the warrior gained tremendous prestige from the sacrifice. His prowess in war was demonstrated. His ability to obtain victims for the gods was proven. Images of bound captives appeared on monuments, showing the king's enemies humbled at his feet. Let us consider a specific historical example. In 638 CE, the city of Dos Pilas, located in what is now Guatemala, was attacked by its neighbor Tikal. The king of Dos Pilas, Balaj Chan Kawil, was defeated and forced to flee. But Balaj Chan Kawil was resourceful. He allied himself with Calakmul, Tikal's great rival. With Calakmul's support, he returned to Dos Pilas and rebuilt his power. Over the following decades, he waged war against Tikal and its allies, expanding his territory and influence. Balaj Chan Kawil's inscriptions boast of his military victories. He recorded the capture and sacrifice of numerous enemies. His success in war allowed him to build elaborate monuments and temples, displaying his power and piety. But the story has a darker ending. Balaj Chan Kawil's aggressive policies created many enemies. After his death, his successors continued his wars, but eventually Dos Pilas itself was attacked and conquered. The city was abandoned and its people dispersed. This pattern repeated itself across the Maya world. Military success brought power and prestige, but it also created resentment and opposition. The cycle of war and revenge was endless, draining resources and destabilizing societies. In the Terminal Classic period, warfare intensified. Fortifications became more common. Cities built defensive walls, located their centers on easily defended hilltops, dug moats. The nature of warfare seemed to change, becoming more destructive and less ritualized. Some scholars believe this intensification of warfare contributed to the classic Maya collapse. As cities fought each other with increasing desperation, trade was disrupted, populations fled conflict zones, agricultural systems broke down. War, combined with environmental stress and political instability, created a downward spiral that the classic Maya civilization could not escape. Part 12. Maya Commerce and Economy. The Maya did not use metal money. Instead, they employed various items as currency. Cacao beans were perhaps the most important. A turkey might cost 100 cacao beans, a slave between 1,000 and 2,000 beans. Cacao beans were valuable because cacao trees only grew in certain areas, making the beans a limited resource. Additionally, cacao was consumed as a luxury drink, so the beans had inherent value. Jade beads, shells, and feathers also served as valuable exchange items. These prestige goods circulated among the elite, exchanged as gifts, tribute, or trade goods. For everyday transactions, barter was common. A farmer might exchange corn for pottery, fish for cotton cloth, labour for food. Markets existed in larger cities, places where people could gather to buy and sell goods. The Spanish chronicler Fray Diego de Landa described Maya markets in the Yucatan. He wrote that people brought all manner of goods to sell: foodstuffs, cloth, pottery, tools, salt, honey, and more. Merchants spread their wares on mats or displayed them from simple stalls. Buyers circulated, examining goods, negotiating prices. Long-distance trade was controlled by specialized merchants. These traders, known as polum in some Maya languages, traveled great distances carrying valuable goods. They moved along established trade routes, often accompanied by armed guards to protect against bandits. The routes followed rivers when possible, as water transport was more efficient than overland travel. Large dugout canoes could carry significant cargo. On rivers like the Usumacinta and the Passion, canoes moved goods between highland and lowland regions. Coastal trade was also important. Large canoes capable of carrying dozens of people and substantial cargo travelled along the Caribbean coast and around the Yucatan Peninsula. These canoes could be 15 meters long or more, carved from single large trees. The famous encounter between Christopher Columbus and a Maya trading canoe in 1502 gives us a glimpse of this maritime trade. Columbus described the canoe as being as long as a Spanish galley, with a cabin in the middle. It carried a variety of goods: cotton textiles, obsidian blades, copper axes, bells, and cacao. What goods moved along these trade routes? Obsidian was crucial. This volcanic glass, sharper than steel, was used for cutting tools and weapons. The major obsidian sources were in the highlands of Guatemala. From there, obsidian moved throughout the Maya world, sometimes travelling hundreds of kilometres from source to consumer. Jade was another important trade good. The Maya highly valued jade, associating it with water, vegetation, and life itself. The main source of jade was the Motagua River Valley in Guatemala. From there, jade travelled to cities across the Maya region, where it was carved into jewellery, ornaments, and ritual objects. Salt was essential for preserving food and for human health. Coastal areas produced salt through evaporation of seawater. Interior cities needed to import salt, creating a steady demand. Cacao, as mentioned, was both a luxury item and a form of currency. It grew in specific lowland areas with the right combination of rainfall and shade. From these growing areas, cacao moved to markets throughout the Maya world. Cotton was grown in areas with the right climate and then traded as raw fibre or woven cloth. The Maya produced cotton textiles of various qualities, from simple everyday cloth to fine textiles with elaborate designs used by the elite or as trade goods. Feathers, Particularly the brilliant green tail feathers of the quetzal bird were highly prized. These feathers adorned the headdresses and costumes of kings and nobles. The quetzal lived in cloud forests at high altitudes, making its feathers relatively rare and valuable. Pottery and other craft goods also moved in trade. While most communities produced their own everyday pottery, fine polychrome vessels made by specialized craftspeople in certain cities were traded over long distances. These decorated vessels served as prestige items for the elite. Trade was not just about economics. It was also about politics and diplomacy. Gift exchange between rulers cemented alliances. A king might send valuable gifts to an ally: jade jewelry, finely woven textiles, carved vessels. The recipient would respond with gifts of equivalent value. This exchange established and maintained political relationships. Marriage alliances also involved the exchange of valuable goods. When a princess married a foreign king, she brought with her a dowry of precious items. Her new husband provided bride wealth to her family. These exchanges were recorded in hieroglyphic texts, emphasizing the political and economic significance of royal marriages. The Maya economy was complex and sophisticated, supporting a large population and allowing for the development of specialized crafts, monumental architecture, and elaborate artistic traditions. The trade networks that connected distant regions facilitated not just the exchange of goods, but also the spread of ideas, styles, and innovations. Yet the economy was also vulnerable. Disruptions to trade routes, whether from warfare, political instability, or environmental changes, could have cascading effects. When trade broke down, cities lost access to essential goods. Elites could no longer obtain the prestige items that legitimized their power. Craft specialists lost their markets. The economic foundation of classic Maya civilization depended on stability and connectivity, and when these broke down in the terminal classic period, the consequences were severe. Part 13. The persistence of Maya knowledge. When the Spanish conquered the Maya lands, they attempted to suppress Maya culture. Books were burned, temples destroyed, traditional practices banned. Yet Maya knowledge persisted, transmitted in various ways. Some Maya nobles and Spanish priests collaborated to record Maya history and traditions using the Latin alphabet. The Popol Vuh of the Quiche Maya, written down in the mid-16th century, preserves creation myths and historical traditions. The books of Chilam Balam, written in Yucatec Maya, contain historical accounts, prophecies, astronomical knowledge, and medical texts. These colonial-era documents are invaluable sources, but they must be used carefully. They were written after the Conquest, influenced by Spanish presence and Christianity. They may have been altered or censored, yet they preserve information that would otherwise have been lost. Maya knowledge also persisted in oral traditions. Stories, songs, and rituals passed from generation to generation, maintaining cultural continuity. Even today, many Maya communities preserve traditions that have roots in the ancient past. The rediscovery of ancient Maya cities by Europeans began in earnest in the 19th century. Explorers like John Lloyd Stephens and Frederick Catherwood travelled through Central America, visiting ruins, making drawings and descriptions. Stephens' books, Incidents of Travel in Central America, Chiapas and Yucatan, and Incidents of Travel in Yucatan, published in the 1840s, brought the Maya to the attention of a wider audience. Archaeological excavation began in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Institutions like the Peabody Museum at Harvard University sponsored expeditions to sites like Copan. The Carnegie Institution of Washington conducted extensive work at Chichen Itza and other sites. Early archaeology was often crude by modern standards. Excavation techniques were destructive, records were incomplete, artifacts were sometimes removed from their contexts. Yet this early work laid the foundation for later, more systematic research. The decipherment of Maya hieroglyphic writing was a long and difficult process. For decades, scholars believed the script was purely ideographic, incapable of recording spoken language. This belief was wrong, but it delayed progress. The breakthrough came from several directions. In the 1950s, Russian scholar Yuri Norizov demonstrated that the script had phonetic elements, that it could record the sounds of the Maya language, not just abstract concepts. His work, building on the writings of Diego de Landa and others, showed how syllabic signs could be combined to write words. Meanwhile, Tatiana Proskouriakov, working at the Carnegie Institution, demonstrated that many inscriptions recorded historical events, not just astronomical or ritual information. By carefully studying the patterns in the texts, she showed that they followed predictable sequences: birth dates, accession dates, marriage dates, warfare, death dates. The inscriptions were recording the lives of real kings, not mythological events. These insights opened the floodgates. By the 1970s and 80s, epigraphers could read significant portions of Maya texts. They could identify specific kings, reconstruct dynastic sequences, understand the political relationships between cities. Scholars like David Stewart, Linda Scheel, and Peter Matthews made rapid progress in decipherment. Today, perhaps 80% or more of Maya hieroglyphic writing can be read. Scholars continue to work on the remaining uncertain signs and meanings, but the overall structure and content of most texts is now understood. This decipherment revolutionized Maya studies. Instead of relying primarily on archaeological evidence and later colonial documents, scholars could now read what the Maya themselves wrote. The voices of ancient kings, speaking across the centuries, could finally be heard. Modern archaeological techniques continue to reveal new information. Ground-penetrating radar, aerial photography, and LiDAR technology allow archaeologists to see beneath the jungle canopy without cutting down vegetation. Entire cities have been discovered this way, mapped from the air, revealing urban landscapes of astonishing complexity. Scientific analysis of artifacts provides new insights. Residue analysis can determine what substances were contained in ancient pottery vessels. DNA analysis of human remains can reveal information about diet, health, and population relationships. Isotope analysis can determine where individuals were born, allowing archaeologists to trace migration and trade patterns. The collaboration between archaeologists, epigraphers, ethnographers, and Maya people themselves creates a richer understanding of Maya culture, past and present. Modern Maya communities contribute to research, sharing their knowledge of traditional practices, languages, and oral histories. This collaboration respects Maya cultural heritage and ensures that research benefits descendant communities. The Maya story is ultimately a human story. Part 14. Maya Astronomy and the Measurement of Time. The Maya were keen observers of the heavens. Night after night, Maya astronomers watched the sky, tracking the movements of celestial bodies with remarkable precision. They did this without telescopes, without sophisticated instruments, using only their eyes and simple sighting devices. Why did the Maya care so much about astronomy? The movements of celestial bodies were believed to influence events on Earth. The gods were associated with planets and stars. The timing of rituals and important events was determined by astronomical cycles. Agricultural activities were coordinated with celestial events. A king's legitimacy might be reinforced by timing his accession or military campaigns to coincide with significant astronomical phenomena. The sun was perhaps the most important celestial body. The Maya carefully observed the sun's annual journey across the sky. They noted the solstices, when the sun reaches its northernmost or southernmost position, and the equinoxes, when day and night are equal in length. Many Maya buildings were aligned to solar events. At Chichen Itza, the Castillo Pyramid creates a serpent shadow effect during the equinoxes. At Uxmal, the governor's palace is aligned to the southernmost rising point of Venus, and its doorway frames this astronomical event. At some sites, structures contained windows or openings positioned so that sunlight would shine through them only on specific days of the year, such as the solstices, or the days when the sun passes directly overhead at noon, which occurs twice a year in tropical latitudes. The moon was also carefully observed. The Maya tracked the lunar month with great accuracy. They knew that the moon's cycle was approximately 29.53 days. They developed a formula to calculate the exact length of the lunar month that was accurate to within seconds. In the Dresden Codex, one of the surviving Maya books, there are extensive lunar tables. These tables allowed Maya astronomer priests to predict eclipses with considerable accuracy. The Maya knew that eclipses follow predictable patterns recurring in cycles. The most important cycle is the Saros cycle of approximately 18 years, though the Maya may have recognized other cycles as well. Eclipses were significant events. A solar eclipse, when the moon passes in front of the sun, darkening the day, was particularly ominous. The Maya needed to know when eclipses would occur so they could perform appropriate rituals to ensure that the sun would return and order would be maintained. Venus was the most important planet to the Maya. This bright, wandering star appears in the sky sometimes as the morning star, rising before the sun, and sometimes as the evening star, setting after the sun. The cycle of Venus takes approximately 584 days. The Maya tracked Venus with obsessive care. In the Dresden Codex, there are Venus tables that calculate the position of Venus over decades. The Maya knew that 5 Venus cycles of 584 days each equal 8 solar years of 365 days, creating a larger cycle of 8 years. Venus was associated with warfare. The heliacal rising of Venus, when it first becomes visible as the morning star after a period of invisibility, was considered an auspicious time for military campaigns. Kings would time their attacks to coincide with Venus's appearance. The Maya also observed other planets. Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn were known and tracked, though perhaps not with the same intensity as Venus. The Maya recognized that these planets moved differently than the stars, and they incorporated planetary movements into their complex cosmological system. The Milky Way, the band of light across the night sky created by our view of our own galaxy, was significant in Maya cosmology. The Maya saw the Milky Way as a great road or river in the sky. In some myths, it was the road travelled by souls on their journey to the underworld. Certain stars and constellations had meaning to the Maya. The Pleiades star cluster was important. The heliacal rising of the Pleiades, when they first become visible in the pre-dawn sky, marked an important point in the agricultural calendar in some regions. The Maya recognized the concept of the ecliptic, the apparent path of the sun across the sky over the course of a year. They divided the ecliptic into constellations, though their constellations were different from those of European astronomy. The Maya had their own zodiac, with 13 signs rather than 12. All of this astronomical knowledge was integrated into the Maya calendar system. The Maya used multiple interlocking calendars, each serving different purposes. The Tzolk'in, the 260-day sacred calendar, consisted of 20-day names combined with the numbers 1 through 13. The day names were Imix, Ik, Akbal, Khan, Chikchan, Kimi, Manik, Lamat, Muluk, Ok, Chuan, Eb, Ben, Ix, Men, Kib, Kaban, Etznab, Kawak, and Ajor. Each day had a unique combination of name and number, cycling through 260 combinations before repeating. The origin of the 260-day cycle is uncertain. Some scholars suggest it relates to the human gestation period, which averages 266 days. Others point to astronomical factors, noting that 260 days is close to the interval between passages of the sun through the zenith in Mesoamerican latitudes. Still, others suggest it may simply be a mathematical product of combining the numbers 13 and 20, both significant in Mesoamerican numerology. Whatever its origin, the Tzolk'in was used for divination, for determining the auspiciousness of days for various activities, and for scheduling religious ceremonies. Each day had its own character and associated deities. Priests consulted the Tzolk'in to determine favourable days for planting, for beginning a journey, for conducting a ceremony, or for going to war. The Harb, the 365-day solar calendar, was used for tracking the seasons and agricultural cycles. It consisted of 18 months of 20 days each, plus a final period of 5 days called the Wayeb. The month names in Yucatec Maya were Pop, Wo, Sip, Sotsa, Tek, Jul, Yaxkin, Mol, Chen, Yax, Sak, Ke, Mak, Kankin, Muan, Pax, Kayab, Kumku, and Wayeb. The 5-day Wayeb period at the end of the year was considered unlucky and dangerous. During this time, the normal order of the world was suspended. The boundary between the human world and the supernatural world became permeable. Malevolent spirits might cross over and cause harm. People stayed inside, avoided conflicts, and performed rituals to protect themselves. The Tzolk'in and Hab meshed together like two interlocking gears. A specific day would have both a Tzolk'in date and a Hab date. For example, a day might be 1 Imix, 1 Pop. The next day would be 2 Ik, 2 Pop, and so on. Because 260 and 365 have a common factor of 5, the full cycle of unique Tzolk'in-Hab combinations takes 52 Hab years or 18,980 days to complete. This cycle is called the calendar round. The completion of a calendar round was a significant event. Every 52 years, the same combination of Tzolk'in and Hab dates would return. This was a time of renewal, of ending and beginning. The Maya performed special ceremonies to mark the completion of a calendar round. However, the calendar round had a limitation. After 52 years, the dates repeated. This made it impossible to distinguish between events that were separated by 52 years. To solve this problem, the Maya developed the long count. The long count is a linear count of days from a mythological starting point. This starting point, in our calendar, corresponds to a date in 3114 BCE, specifically August 11th or September 6th, depending on which correlation is used. Scholars generally use the August correlation. The long count uses units of days grouped hierarchically. One day is called a kin. 20 kins equal 1 weinel. 18 weinels equal 1 ton. 20 tons equal 1 ka'an. 20 ketons equal 1 bakton. A long count date is written as a series of numbers representing baktons, kartons, tons, weinels, and kins. For example, the long count, date 9.16.0.0.0, represents 9 baktoons, 16 katoons, 0 toons, 0 weinels, and 0 kins since the starting point. This date corresponds to 751 CE. The long count allowed the Maya to unambiguously date events. Every day since the mythological starting point had a unique long count date. Inscriptions typically include both the long count date and the calendar round date, providing redundant information that helps scholars verify their readings. The Maya also thought in terms of larger cycles. 13 Ba'aktuns equal approximately 5,125 years. The completion of 13 Ba'aktuns marked a major cycle. The most recent completion of 13 Baktuns occurred on December 21st, 2012. This date received attention in popular culture, with some people misinterpreting it as a Maya prophecy of the end of the world. In reality, it was simply the completion of one cycle and the beginning of another, comparable to the rolling over of an odometer. The Maya also calculated dates far into the past and future. Some inscriptions refer to dates billions of years in the past, presumably mythological events. Others calculate dates thousands of years into the future, demonstrating the Maya conception of deep time and cyclical history. This sophisticated calendar system required considerable mathematical knowledge. The Maya understood place value notation, the concept that the position of a number determines its value. They understood 0 as a number and used it as a placeholder in their calculations. These mathematical concepts were not widespread in the ancient world. The Romans, for example, never developed the concept of 0, which made their number system much less efficient for calculations. Maya mathematics used a vigesimal or base 20 system. In our base 10 system, each position represents a power of 10. In the Maya base 20 system, each position represents a power of 20. The first position represents 1s, the second position represents 20s, The third position represents 400s, and so on. The Maya wrote numbers using only 3 symbols: a dot for 1, a bar for 5, and a shell for 0. Using these symbols in different combinations and positions, they could write any number. For example, the number 19 would be written as 3 bars and 4 dots in the lowest position. The number 20 would be written as 1 dot in the second position and a shell in the first position. This elegant system allowed the Maya to perform complex astronomical calculations. They could multiply, divide, add, and subtract large numbers. They could calculate the synodic periods of planets, predict eclipses decades in advance, and determine the dates of future astronomical events with remarkable accuracy. The practical applications of this knowledge were numerous. Agricultural timing depended on accurate knowledge of the seasons. Religious ceremonies had to be conducted on auspicious dates determined by the calendar. Building projects were often timed to correspond with significant calendar events. The dedication of a temple might be scheduled for a calendar round completion or a Katan ending. The ability to predict astronomical events also reinforced the power of the elite. When a priest could accurately predict an eclipse, it demonstrated his special connection to the gods and the cosmic order. When a king timed a military campaign to coincide with the appearance of Venus, he was aligning himself with celestial forces, claiming divine sanction for his actions. Yet, all of this astronomical and mathematical knowledge could not prevent the collapse of classic Maya civilization. The stars continued their ordained movements. The calendar cycles continued to turn, but the cities were abandoned, the royal dynasties ended, and the great monuments fell silent. This reminds us that even the most sophisticated knowledge cannot protect a civilization from the consequences of environmental degradation, political instability, and social stress. The astronomical and mathematical achievements of the Maya stand as testament to human intellectual capacity. Working with simple tools, patient observation, and rigorous mathematical reasoning, the Maya developed a detailed understanding of celestial mechanics that rivaled anything produced in the Old World until the development of modern astronomy. It is a story of people trying to make sense of the world, to impose order on chaos, to ensure their survival and that of their children. It is a story of ambition and achievement, but also of failure and loss. The collapse of the classic Maya cities reminds us that no civilization is permanent. Even the greatest cities can fall. Even the most powerful kingdoms can collapse. Environmental stress, political instability, social upheaval, these are challenges that all complex societies face. How we respond to these challenges determines whether we thrive or decline. The survival and persistence of Maya culture, despite conquest and oppression, reminds us of the resilience of human communities. Cultures can adapt and endure, carrying forward traditions and values even in the face of tremendous adversity. As we study the Maya, we gain not just historical knowledge, but also perspective on our own civilization. We see patterns that recur throughout human history. We see both the achievements and the limitations of human societies. We are reminded of our common humanity, linking us to people who lived centuries or millennia ago in very different circumstances, but who shared the same fundamental hopes and fears, the same desire to create meaning and leave a legacy. The pyramids of Tikal still stand, rising above the jungle. The murals of Bonampak still glow with colour, the hieroglyphic texts still speak to us if we have the knowledge to read them. The Maya have left us a rich legacy, and it is our responsibility to preserve that legacy, to study it with respect and rigor, and to share it with future generations. And so, our exploration of Maya history comes to a close. The Maya built cities in the jungle, reached for the stars, created works of timeless beauty. They were brilliant and brutal, sophisticated and superstitious, much like any other human society. Their story is worth remembering, worth studying, worth contemplating as we drift off to sleep, our minds filled with images of stone pyramids, painted murals, hieroglyphic texts, and the long sweep of human history. Thank you for joining me on this journey through time. May you rest well, and may your dreams be filled with the wonders of the ancient Maya.